What's the worst defense you've seen someone make in a court? As a public defender, you're thrown into a lot of crappy cases with little hope of winning and with very little time to win them. My approach was to make any argument within the ethical rules that govern attorneys, which led me to a hilarious court appearance. My client was charged with possession of marijuana, a misdemeanor first offense that carries no jail time in my state. Client and his friend were smoking in a park. Some citizen reports it to the police, and the cops come and find them in their car after smoking. My client admits to the cop that he was smoking. Obviously I'm thinking he's got no defense here. Other guy admits to smoking and gives the police the weed and pipe from his backpack. The entirety of the evidence was the admission and the physical evidence. So, I argue at trial, bench trial, no jury, with zero expectation of winning, that the state failed to prove my client ever possessed the marijuana, Your Honor. For all we know, the other guy at all times had possession of the marijuana. For all we know, he held the pipe to my client's lips and lit it for him. A discussion amongst myself, the judge, and the prosecutor ensues. Ray, can you smoke marijuana and not be in possession of it? I got the decision a few months later. Not guilty. Bravo. Thanks for doing your best for us ne'er-do-wells that are, admittedly, breaking the law, but don't necessarily deserve to be legally screwed for it. A guy was in court for a DUI, and he insisted on taking the stand when his lawyer advised him not to. Turned out he wanted the judge to know the cop who arrested him was just some rude kid trying to be a big shit, and he wasn't even drunk. He'd only had 2 bottles of wine with dinner. His lawyer interrupted him to try to get him to stop talking, and he told his lawyer to shut up. Then the judge advised him to listen to his lawyer, and he told the judge, I'm not a damn child. Don't interrupt me, and the judge just smiled and sat back and said, please, proceed. We all knew it was over for this guy. He got maxed on the charge and advised in the future if he was going to pay for a lawyer, he should listen to him. Story from driver's ed. Guy was in court for killing 2 relatively young gals while drunk. Defendant lawyer claimed that the young girls should be at fault because this man was drunk and the girl was sober. She should have had the reaction time to get out of the way. Pretty stupid defense, but in terms of the worst defense, nothing beats that. Absolutely appalling. I gave testimony as a health professional in a child custody case. The mother wanted to revoke the father's joint physical custody of the 8-year-old girl. The issue was that girl was asked to wipe her father's butt, apply lotion, and wash his genitals. The father's case was that because he was obese, fatigued, suffering from frequent diarrhea, and taxed to take care of his own hygiene without assistance, it was acceptable for her to do this as long as she wore gloves to avoid contracting hepatitis C from him. He also argued that it taught her a lesson about compassion and caring for those unable to do so themselves, and helped them to bond. Truly incredible. Please, for all that is holy, tell us his custody was denied. I knew a guy who said that the police who responded to the domestic that he had perpetrated had no right to charge him with M possession since the M was so pure, no one could have seen it. The Drax defense. Friend of mine once got a ticket for leaving her car standing in the marked off no parking zone in front of a grocery store, which she thought was outrageous because she was just running in to get a pack of smokes. Then she saw how much the ticket was for, something like $120, which she thought was just ridiculous because dang it, she was just running in for a pack of smokes. I mean, come on, how is that worth $120? So her plan was to go to court and contest the ticket and point out to the judge how ridiculous that was and offer to compromise it like maybe $40 because for Pete's sake, she was just running in for a pack of smokes, and let's be reasonable here. Yes, her plan was to haggle with the judge over how much the ticket should be worth. So she goes to court and sits there most of the day waiting for her case to be called, and eventually she gets bored and goes outside to grab a smoke and hang out. And while she's out there, her case is called. She missed the whole thing. Didn't even get to try the whole come on. $120? For that? Come on. I'll give you $40, and even that's highway robbery defense on the judge and got hit for the full value of the ticket plus court costs. If this happened to me, I would quit smoking. I had a guy come into my jail with a robbery charge. He tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding because he just took a girl's money and kept the weed he was supposed to buy her for himself, so at most he was just a crappy boyfriend. He made his situation worse by throwing in, "Did she tell you if fricking she was underage?" That last bit threw me for a horrible loop. A domestic abuse case. The husband was the accused. The couple was in their late 70s or early 80s. When asked if he did indeed abuse his wife, the husband started complaining that some 40 years ago the wife pretended to be ill and he had to do the laundry all by himself, as if he expected the judge to just go, "Oh okay, I guess that's cool then." You see, the real victim of everything is me. That's why I need to beat up the bee every single day, and it's so hard. My sister told the judge that the light wasn't that red. Then he said he was going to suspend her license and she said, "But my dad already took it away." It was Independence Day, Your Honor. A day to celebrate the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for. A day to celebrate what this country is. So yes, Judge, I did do some M for freedom. This was in a drug treatment court. Freedom M, Your Honor. I took a guy to small claims court. His defense was I didn't have the product, so I couldn't ship it to him. Obviously, the judge was like, "But you took his money, the guy." Yay. So I could buy the product and ship it to him. Judge, did you do that, guy? Not yet. Judge, do you have his money, guy? No, I had an emergency and had to spend it. That was that. I won. So my mother was renting a house that went into foreclosure while she was living there. Turns out the landlord stopped using the rent money to pay the mortgage. One stressful year later and bingo dingo, my mother owns the house and pays less in mortgage and taxes than her old rent. I never touched my daughters. I never hurt my daughters. Never would I sexually abuse my daughters. Except that one time at the cabin. The guy became an instant meme in our country language. Reminds me of a recent case here in Edmonton. Man convicted to 23 years for sexually assaulting his daughter, S, and trying to sell one both online for sex. Said he agreed he was guilty in the eyes of the law, but felt he did nothing wrong since he was married to the girl, also his daughter, and the Bible says it's allowed between a man and his wife. The judge let the man talk for 3 whole hours. I overheard this guy tell the officer that yes, his car license is suspended, but I don't remember the correct terminology, the driving truck one isn't and neither is his moped license. 3 people and the judge tried to explain that a suspended license means he's lost his privilege to drive in general and altogether. He kept fighting it and saying he wasn't fixing anything cause he's now driving a moped and that license is still okay. He came out with saying it's suspended for several old DUIs. Lawyer here, bored at work and not wanting to get started on something, so I've seen some very stupid crap, though I mostly don't do criminal cases, so the stupid crap I tend to see requires a bit of explanation. However, when I was in law school I worked with a group that helped get restraining orders for people in abusive relationships. Family court in Queens was very much a cattle call situation and it was easy to watch hearing after hearing, which I always found fun. On one particular day there were 2 absolutely amazing hearings. One was a case of 2 gay men. The guy claiming abuse was a huge man. Fat and definitely over 6'4". He was against his tiny partner. At first the magistrate was very incredulous, likely thinking what we were all thinking about the massive size disparity between the two. When the tiny guy got up to speak, he started scolding his larger partner for saying things like that, and at some point, he threw a pen at the bigger man. The bigger guy started to cry, and then the little guy started taunting him. The other involved a man trying to get an ex-parte order against his girlfriend, which is relatively rare. It happens, but the vast majority are women getting them against men. This time, however, before his particular hearing could start, a woman came into the courtroom flanked with 2 other women. They were all 3 straight out of central casting for what you'd imagine NYC gang women to look like. They walk in and see the woman's partner seated in the courtroom. Though his hearing wasn't up yet, she immediately starts threatening everyone in the room, but especially the magistrate. The magistrate had them escorted out with the bailiffs, who called in extra About 30 minutes later, the dude's hearing was up. The magistrate basically immediately granted the restraining order and said he'll put a note in for the full hearing about that woman's conduct. Not a lawyer, but this story comes from a cop. So, they got a call about a guy having sex with a girl in his van. They show up and arrest the guy. He's 20. The girl is 12. When they arrest him, his defense is, but she told me she was 14. Was sitting in court for traffic violation. The guy in front of me had a speeding ticket. To fight it, he pulled out a large stack of papers, about 3/4 of an inch thick. The stack of papers was a law he pulled out from the 1990s from a different country. The poor judge had to read through. I'm an animal control officer, and I was seeking permanent possession of this guy's dog after he drunkenly bit, choked, and tormented it. He'd already been charged with animal cruelty, which is a separate case date. This guy was what we call a seasonal transient, meaning he was a part of our homeless population, but he only stayed in the city during the summer. In court, his defense ranged from admitting he had made a drunken mistake to accusing the witnesses during cross-examination, as he represented himself, of being biased against homeless people. His story also fluctuated about why he did this to his dog. First, because she's dog aggressive and I was disciplining her despite no other dogs ever having been present to evac she wasn't listening to me. My favorite parts were the following. He tried to argue that because we had no photos of physical damage, no abuse had occurred. Unfortunately for him, our state cruelty laws don't require an animal to be injured to be considered abused. He had pulled her up by her ears so that her front feet didn't touch the ground and bit her multiple times on the ears and face. In court, he defended this by claiming that it was a valid training technique used by Alaskans and many breeders. His proof was a handwritten name and number of a breeder friend of his on a square of paper. He lost. His dog, an absolute sweetheart with huge bat ears, and not an ounce of dog aggression the shelter could find after multiple behavior tests and assessments, was adopted by an older retired couple looking for a good pet to keep them company at home. Was in court for a traffic violation in the state of Florida. I'm sitting with a room full of people who are also contesting their tickets. There was a lady who looked like she was a waitress who got up to make her case in front of the judge. She point blank told the judge in front of the officer that ticketed her that her violation was balls from a know-it-all cop. The judge then questioned the officer. Your Honor, the defendant's car was going 75 and 35 and ran several stoplights. The judge then proceeded to ask why those charges were unreasonable. Her answer was parody level. I was drinking last night and woke up late. I couldn't lose another job, so I needed to be on time. She ended up paying $500 for wasting the judge's time in addition to her tickets. Hands down, it's a tie between every sovereign citizen I've seen in court for a simple traffic violation like displaying expired plates or not registering a vehicle. The defense is always a stupid variation of this court doesn't have jurisdiction because the wrong flag is displayed in the courtroom. No, you see, Your Honor, I wasn't driving my car. I was traveling with my vehicle. You have no authority over me because according to maritime law, my body is a sea traveling vessel. I defended a guy on a DUI that jumped into the back seat after he got pulled over and claimed someone else was driving. He was the only one in the car. I watched a friend try a DWI case. Her client testified that she wasn't drunk while driving and therefore not guilty because she was actually high on M at the time. My friend put her head down and started hitting her head against the desk. I. Judge, why do you think showing up to this young lady's home unannounced, after she has made it clear to you she is not romantically interested in you, was an acceptable thing to do? Guy I was getting a restraining order against. I just wanted to lick the inside of her dog's mouth. There's lots of backstory to this, but let's just say I had a very creepy stalker. In my law graduation, I was working as a trainee for the college, lawyer assistant, and I honestly saw that scene. Judge, where were you on Tuesday 11 PM? Accused, I was working in the street selling pot. Judge, you were doing what? Accused, selling pot. The lawyer looked to him like, WTF. Hey, some people may be a lot of things, but this guy is no liar. I saw this go down while waiting for my traffic ticket. Judge, so, you were seen pulling a stop sign out of the ground and throwing it in the river. Accused, yes. sir. J. Were you drunk? A. No, sir. J. The ticket says you were intoxicated. A. No, sir. J. Okay, let's say I believe you. I will throw out this drunk and disorderly charge. A. Thank you, sir. J. But I will have to charge you with the destruction of government property and endangering the public. That comes with at least a year in jail. So I'll ask one more time. Were you drunk? A. Yes, sir. Very drunk, sir. I was in traffic court and the first guy to go before the judge got pulled over doing some crazy speed, like 140 miles per hour. The judge essentially told the guy to say he wouldn't ever do it again and that it was a mistake, and in return, the judge would drop the ticket fee and the points on his record. The guy countered with, "Well, I drive that fast all the time, so I'm really good at it, and I don't think it was dangerous at all because of how good of a driver I am." Guy could have walked out totally free, but instead got a $2,500 FNE and 2 points on his record. I'm a reporter and I covered my first murder trial a few months ago. The defendant was a father who had been accused of shooting his 22-year-old daughter in the face. The father verified that the only people in the house at the time of the murder were him and his daughter. The defense obviously didn't have a lot to work with, but one of their arguments was the defendant couldn't have done this because the gun that was used isn't even a man's gun. Needless to say, the dude was found guilty. My ex tried the "I didn't do it" defense during the restraining order hearing. The judge looked at him, already annoyed by him being late, said, "You're telling me you did not do the crime you confessed to the responding officer and plead guilty to 3 weeks ago? Honestly, if it wasn't a shit show to deal with, it would have been hilarious." I was a juror on a DUI case. The driver had drank 6 vodka tonics and 3 beers in about 3 hours. His lawyer tried to argue that electronic interference is what caused him to fail the breathalyzer test. Maybe electronic interference was the name of the vodka company. Traffic court. I was the defendant. I show up in a suit and tie, and I'm waiting for my attorney. Judge is there. First part of the day is just making sure we all show up, and then the city attorney offers us a discount to plead guilty. That is, first time offenders have to sign up for a class on safe driving. Other than that, 30% off the top. Always fight your tickets, people. Anyway, I wasn't going to accept a plea deal cause I had an airtight case. Even my lawyer agreed. She was nice and actually listened to me and did the groundwork. So she shows up. I've already checked in and I refuse the initial offer. She then tells me to go wait outside while the city attorney tries, again, to get me to take the plea, and others. So the thing with traffic court is that the officer who wrote the ticket has to show up. My attorney was concerned because the guy who ticketed me typically shows up. So we go back into court and I'm sitting there and a group of guys come in all wearing ripped jeans and graphic shirts with dirty work boots. One of them looks familiar but I can't place him and figure it's just some more people waiting for tickets. They were the cops for the various cases. The judge was not amused. Their defense for their condition was that court was too early. Me and about 10 other people all had our tickets dismissed. I have the signed letter from the judge framed. We didn't have to say a thing. The poor city attorney though, he looked like he was about to die when the judge asked to speak to him. Like seriously, I honestly feel he felt he was walking to his execution. I was sitting on a jury for a case of reckless endangerment, or reckless driving, or both. Anyway, the defense was, it's not illegal, because he didn't mean to. He was fricked up on pills. I seriously hope that guy got an appeal for bad counsel. It can be a valid defense if the pills were properly prescribed by a doctor and it was an unforeseen rare side effect. So, maybe not as bad as you think. I only sexually assaulted her to make her feel more confident about her body as she was a big woman. Paul Gascoigne, ex-professional footballer. Apparently it wasn't a sexual act because that's not how he intended it. Therefore there was no sexual assault. I was a juror for a case against a woman that was charged with selling a stolen gun to a pawnbroker and possession of a gun by a convicted felon. She took the stand and admitted to finding the gun at a friend's house and taking it to the pawnbroker. Her attorney's entire closing argument was that the state failed to prove that it was a gun and the charges should be dropped. Never mind the fact that she admitted to it being a gun. The guy that owned the gun said it was his gun and we had it right there in front of us. The defense said it was not a gun because the state had not fired it to prove it was a gun. And of course as soon as we get back to the room to deliberate, one of the other jurors said he was not convinced it was a real gun. That was a really long day. I went to court because my next door neighbor tried to drive drunk, and when his truck wouldn't move, he got so angry that he threw several of the complex's large 6-inch landscaping rocks through the windshield. One missed and hit my car, leaving a large dent on the hood, several scrapes, and about $1,000 in damage. He then moved his truck a few spaces over, leaving a truck-shaped hole in the glass that was all over the ground next to my car. The rocks were still in his cab. The other rock was still on my hood. I called the police and this 32-year-old man, had his mom lie to the cops for him. For some reason, they found my story more plausible. At court, he showed up drunk. His lawyer asked for a delay, and the judge approved it, and promptly recused himself, as he himself had represented this man 15+ years earlier. During law school in class I had to defend a hotel manager who was putting hidden cameras in the rooms. As part of my university course I had to sit in on a court case and create a court report. I turned up on a random day and asked to enter for my course and they allowed it. Turned out I was in a hearing about a man who was sexually abusing his stepdaughter and her friends. A key piece of evidence was a photo of his daughter tied to a bed and stripped. It was very obviously her. Her full face was in view and she also had a very recognizable and undeniable birthmark on her jaw. The man's defense was that this couldn't have been taken by him as he didn't recognize the girl in the photo. Judge Daniel laughed at him there in the courtroom. He shot the guy, admitted to shooting the guy, but said the police framed him for murder. He was defending himself and kicked off the trial by singing the Star-Spangled Banner and had to be taken out of the courtroom. Some guy sang a song about how sorry he was. It was honestly beautiful. He still killed a kid. Dumbass got life in prison. What can I say except, you're welcome. Mine is sort of a worst best defense sort of scenario. A few years ago I was doing jury duty at Crown Court in the Old Bailey. It was to judge this gang violence case against a Sri Lankan gang in London. Essentially someone had gotten attacked with a machete in a car park and left for dead. There were 6 suspects in this trial, 2 of which had left the country. What was very clear was that all 6 of these people were in complete cahoots. Every one of these 4 came to trial and blamed one other, so no one got blamed twice, but every one of them got the blame placed on them. Most of the evidence pointed to one of the guys in the trial, or one of the guys that had left the country. We had to vote not guilty because there was so much reasonable doubt against all of them that none of them could be prosecuted. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.